Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Today's interview is about an enslaved man during the Civil War who escapes. Not only does he escape slavery, but he also steals a Confederate ship. What's wild is that we're not even halfway through his life story. He joins the military, becomes the first African American to command a vessel, becomes a state legislator in South Carolina. He creates the first statewide public school system in the nation, and then gets elected to the House of Representatives. Some people really do live life to the fullest. His story is the subject of a book by his great-great-grandson, Michael Boulware Moore, titled Freedom on the Sea. Up ahead, Moore talks to Here Now's Anthony Brooks about his ancestors' wild life story.
This message comes from Whole Foods Market. Follow your wellness goals and save big with sales on supplements and vitamins. Explore an abundance of high-quality multivitamins, probiotics, and protein powders. Keep good habits going strong. Cook homemade meals featuring sustainable wild-caught sockeye salmon and many more delicious and lean protein options. For wellness when you need it, shop Smart Meal shortcuts to stay motivated, like ready-to-eat salad kits. Shop all things wellness at Whole Foods Market.
Let's take a moment now to tell the story of a true Civil War hero. Robert Smalls was born into slavery in Beaufort, South Carolina. During the Civil War, the still enslaved Smalls was working aboard a steamboat commissioned by the Confederacy called the Planter. On a May evening in 1862, the Planter's captain and crew disembarked to go into town. Seeing an opportunity to escape, Smalls seized control of the ship and sailed into Charleston Harbor, where he connected with Union soldiers and freedom. After his escape, Smalls helped convince President Lincoln to enlist formerly enslaved men in the Army, and he eventually served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Robert Smalls' remarkable story of his daring escape and all that followed was almost lost to history. But now there are plans to preserve and celebrate it. Next year, a new monument honoring Smalls will be unveiled outside the South Carolina Statehouse. We're joined now by Michael Boulware Moore. He is the great-great-grandson of Robert Smalls and author of the book Freedom on the Sea, the true story of the Civil War hero Robert Smalls and his daring escape to freedom. And Michael, welcome to Here and Now. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Anthony. It's great to be here.
So when did you become aware of your family's connection to Robert Smalls? Is this a story you grew up with and knew about all your life?
Yeah, literally, it has been a part of not just my sort of physical DNA, but my kind of cultural DNA. I grew up with Robert's granddaughter, who was my grandmother, and her siblings. And so really among my earliest memories are being at family reunions with my grandmother and a number of her siblings, and just hearing about the story, hearing about his exploits in the Civil War, in the state legislature in South Carolina, in the United States House of Representatives, and in the like. And so it has always been with me.
Tell me more about this thrilling and dangerous escape aboard the Planter. So this was, if I have this right, this was a heavily fortified part of the low country waterways of coastal South Carolina. And Smalls had to sail past Confederate forts before he reached the Union soldiers, right? How did he pull that off?
Yeah, Robert was enslaved on this boat, this Confederate boat, the Planter. It was a 149, 150-foot side wheel steamer. It was used to ferry men and munitions and the like all around the Low Country. He became its pilot and so was responsible for sailing the Planter, in all the various nooks and crannies of that area, and knew the various passcodes required to get past the various forts. And so just saw an opportunity. He would notice that the Confederate crew on the Planter would occasionally leave for the night. They weren't supposed to leave the ship, but on occasion they would leave for the night going into the city. And he concocted a plan and was able to persuade the other African Americans on the crew of this ship. And on the night of May 12th, 1862, heading into the early morning hours of May 13th, they saw an opportunity and seized it.
Wow. So after he gains his freedom and delivers this ship to the Union Army, essentially, right? He's made captain of the Planter, making him the first African American to command a U.S. military vessel. So what role did he play in the Civil War after his escape?
Well, I think, he played a extremely crucial role in the Civil War. He was taken to Washington. He ultimately met with Secretary of War Stanton and President Lincoln. And I think by virtue of his act of seizing this ship and sailing it to freedom, and also I believe by his sort of personal persuasion, he was able to convince President Lincoln to admit formerly enslaved men into the war effort, which allowed about 200,000 men to serve. Some historians suggest that the United States might not prevail in the Civil War without that influx of 200,000 men. So the fact that, Robert Smalls may have had a really heavy hand in the United States prevailing in the Civil War, it doesn't get much more impactful than that.
No, not at all. That's really something. So after the war, Smalls entered politics. As you mentioned, he served in the South Carolina legislature and then the U.S. House of Representatives. Talk about the challenges that he must have faced as one of the first black lawmakers during Reconstruction.
He, I think, took advantage of his acclaim as a Civil War hero and was first elected to the General Assembly in Columbia and in South Carolina, and then to the state Senate. And while in the legislature here, he wrote the legislation to create the first free statewide public school system in South Carolina, which was the first in the nation. It had vexed him that he wasn't able to learn to read and write, wasn't able to go to school as a youngster, and so he worked to make sure that everyone had access to public education, and then went on, was elected to the United States Congress, served 5 terms there, and he, as mentioned, was the first African American to command a United States naval vessel. Some people say through the period of the Civil War that because he was getting a salary, and obviously 99, I think, % of African Americans were enslaved and not getting a salary, they say that Robert was the highest salaried black man in America during that period.
Wow. So he went from being enslaved to serving in Congress. He lived long enough to see the end of Reconstruction and the beginning of Jim Crow in South Carolina. And I'm just curious what crosses your mind when you think about all your great-great-grandfather built and then had to see sort of that moment in history, which wasn't one of the great moments of history.
Yeah, I can only imagine that he was just profoundly disappointed. Doesn't really do it justice,
Right.
but just sort of gutted. He had worked so hard to create a state and a broader society where all people were considered citizens and had access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Constitutional Convention in South Carolina, when all of the pillars of Reconstruction were dissolved, he is noted in that convention with giving probably his most famous speech, where he ended it saying, "My race needs no special defense, for the past history of them in this country proves them to be the equal of anyone anywhere. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life."
Wow.
And I think that speaks to his resolve.
What lessons from his life are still relevant today when you think about your great-great-grandfather, Robert Smalls?
I think back to one specific incident in his life that just really demonstrated his sense of character and humanity. After the Civil War, he had gone back and he actually bought the big house, the house that his master and their family had lived in, and was living there. But his former master had died. His former master's wife came back to the house. She was mentally and physically ill. She thought she was coming back to her home. And there were a lot of ways that Robert could have dealt with that. This was a person who believed, not that many years ago, that he was a piece of property and akin to, a beast of burden and the like, but Robert embraced her and, brought her into the home and allowed her to live there for the remaining years of her life. So I think now in a world where similarly we are very divided, I think if we can just reject all of the partisanship, the politicization of things, and focus on those core human aspects that unite us all as Americans, as human beings, I think there's something to that.
Michael Boulware Moore is the great-great-grandson of Robert Smalls. He's also the author of the book Freedom on the Sea, the true story of the Civil War hero Robert Smalls and his daring escape to freedom. Michael, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure talking to you about your great-great-grandfather, Robert Smalls. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And just a reminder that signing up for Book of the Day Plus is a great way to support NPR's book coverage and public media. And you'll get to listen to every episode sponsor-free. So please go find out more at plus.npr.org/Book of the Day.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Washington Wise. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. Washington Wise from Charles Schwab is an original podcast that unpacks the stories making news in Washington. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise.
This message comes from Prolon. Feeling heavy and depleted after the holidays? Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet aims to make it easy to reset your body, habits, and energy heading into the new year. Developed at USC's Longevity Institute, the goal of Prolon's nutrition program is to rejuvenate you from within by working at the cellular level to support fat loss, glowing skin, and sharper focus. Get 15% off plus a bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Capella University. Interested in a quality online education? Capella is accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.